Darkness kills, destroys the will. Find a spark, make hearts thrill. Hear the tales of time so grim. Shine a light, don't let it dim. Heather Brown downtown, bound. True crime story she's found. In the shadows, secret stay. Need a light that finds the way.
Welcome back to Defeating the Darkness, True Crime Stories with Downtown Heather Brown. That's me, your host. I'm a former homicide and sexual assault prosecutor here in Orange County. And tonight we have the second episode with Dr. Cheryl Arutt, who is a phenomenal forensic psychologist and badass and friend. And she has so much to tell us. And if you didn't listen to the first episode, you got to stop the tape and go back and listen to the first one, because she just talks about these fascinating techniques and tools in order to come alongside victims of trauma, anyone who's suffering some type of trauma, to give them hope and healing and get their lives back on track, which when we left off, welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you back and follow up and finish up our conversation.
Yeah.
When we last left off, we were talking about these really cool tricks of the trade that you have as a clinical psychologist, actually treating patients to try to help them to heal their trauma.
Yeah.
And you talked about the Vegas.
It's Vegas. It sounds like the place with the casinos, but it doesn't really have anything to do with that. But it sounds exactly like that.
All right, that's a good way to remember it.
Yeah.
Vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve.
So the vagus nerve that runs from your spine down through your
it wanders through like all of your organs, and it runs through there are two actually vagus nerves. There's I'm going to sound so nerdy if I use all the terminology, but the dorsal vagal is the one in the back. That's fight, flight, freeze, and all of that. But there's ventral vagal, because guess what? It's also good for survival, for us to be able to signal safety and warmth and friendliness to each other. So this is what makes our eyes crinkle up and smile when we smile at each other, and our vocal tone when we're being friendly and social. So when we feel safe enough, the ventral vagal in mammals helps us connect, make friends, fall in love, have families, raise our kids, all of that. So that, as you can probably imagine, can get a little messed up for trauma survivors. Sometimes they feel like they can't afford to go there. And so there's these two. There's the ventral vagal, which is the social, and the dorsal vagal, which is the fight, flight, freeze, survival.
Interesting. Okay. And both of those can obviously affect your ability to function on a daily basis.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, there's a new book out called Our Polyvagal World that was written by Dr. Stephen Porges and his son, Seth Porges, that I highly recommend. It's like very accessible to read. And it's all about this nervous system and the idea that it's almost like our body has two totally different software programs, one for survival and the other for wellness and well-being. And when we feel safe enough, the wellness program runs. And that's not only when we connect and do all that good stuff, but that's also when we digest our food well, when we sleep, when we do cell repair, when our immune systems work, all this really good stuff happens. When all of a sudden it's like, oh no, my life's in danger, it's like we switch software programs and we do the survival mode. And that's when we react instead of respond, and we figure out if we need to run or fight or shut down or fawn to survive. And because it's like very expensive for the body to run that program, it stops doing the wellness stuff. So that's why people don't sleep, and that's why people under stress get digestive problems and get sick, and all of these other things happen. And our bodies are completely different, even though they're the same body, depending upon whether we feel safe inside or whether we don't feel safe.
Wow, that's fascinating. And these techniques that we were talking about the last episode, EMDR, and these are techniques that you as a clinical psychologist, and I'm assuming others, use in order to treat patients so that they can rework and reframe and restructure.
Rewire the nervous system so it can feel safe again.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's like it really is such a message, I think, of hope for anyone who's suffering trauma. You got to get out there and find a good clinical psychologist who knows these are these new? Like, how new are these techniques?
EMDR therapy was discovered in the 80s.
Okay.
And so I guess, I mean, to me, it seems kind of new, but there are, I think, there's like 45 years of research. It's an evidence-based treatment. Insurance often covers it. There's a lot of international studies around the world, and people can get trained in EMDR, and there are different levels of training. I'm something called an EMDR consultant, which means that I did basic and then got certified and then got trained to certify other therapists to help them get their hours towards certification. So I like to help other therapists learn how to use EMDR therapy with more like complex and developmental trauma, like the child sexual abuse situations and things where it's not like one car crash kind of single incident trauma, which is what people first found out about this for. Like if people are good and life's going well and one bad thing happens, they witness a shooting, they can do EMDR therapy on that one target and clear that trauma, sometimes in just a few sessions, and they're good.
Wow, that's wonderful.
You know, more complex trauma and things that happen in childhood, or if there are multiple events, it does take more time because there are more
layers to the onion,
exactly.
I suppose, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And so that might take more sessions, but not necessarily like you have to keep on doing this, or?
You don't have to keep on doing this, and it really depends. I mean, there are different ways to kind of figure out the way to approach the treatment. And originally, originally the idea was you target either the first trauma event or the worst one. And that works when it's single incident trauma and when people have already a structure inside where they felt safe enough when they were growing up and developing that they have an ability to do that. If somebody had horrible ongoing abuse, sometimes that's not the best way to begin. We want to target like lower hanging fruit. We want to help somebody get a little taste of the relief with something that isn't the biggest one, that feels a little bit more manageable before they start unpacking the big stuff. And so there's some different ways. We don't go right in and start reprocessing the trauma. We do things to help build people's ability to be in their body, because like there has to be somebody home in order to heal. You have to be able to be in your body and notice that. We do things to help people feel safe enough to
What does that mean when you say be in your body?
That is such a good question. I like glossed right over that. But one of the things that people do to cope with something that they can't escape from and they don't want to feel, I'm going to answer the opposite of what you asked first.
Okay.
If they can't leave the situation, they leave their body or they leave in their mind. It's called dissociation. And people who have trauma do this. Very often, during the trauma, they'll talk about time changing, slowing down, or speeding up, or that they felt like they were like hovering in the corner of the room, observing what was happening to them.
Yes, I've seen that many times in rape cases.
Yes.
Where they were like, it was as if it wasn't even happening to them. They were watching it happen to them, but they weren't in their body.
Exactly. That's dissociation. That's a survival strategy. That's one of those automatic things that can happen. And it's a way of not having to be there while the terrible thing is going on.
It's like a psychological mechanism to safeguard your well-being that
Yeah.
your body automatically does. You don't think, okay, I'm going to dissociate so I don't feel this.
Exactly right. It just happens. And it's a great thing to be able to do. Like if the tiger were eating you, would you want to be there and feel every bit of it?
No, God, no.
Right? So yeah.
I don't even know that I'd care about getting eaten by the tiger as much as I don't want to feel the fear of seeing the tiger coming to eat me.
Right.
It's like a plane crash. I always say, I don't mind like actually dying in the plane crash. I just don't want that minute of terror before it hits the ground.
people don't like feeling out of control, and people don't like having no power over what happens to them, right?
Yeah, right.
Or not knowing what to expect. And this is a survival thing where people just, you leave yourself. So far, so good. Great thing to do if someone is assaulting you. That can be the very best option. The problem is that becomes a go-to and a habit that people do whenever they are triggered by anything, whenever they see something that's a reminder of the trauma, or they think that they might be about to. And the things that, and I'm using trigger in a clinical sense. I know people talk about triggers all the time on TikTok and Instagram. And an actual trauma trigger, it's like our brains are association making machines. So when something really bad happens, your brain goes, pay attention to what else was going on when the bad thing happened. So if I see that again, I'm going to be ready. My nervous system will kick in and it won't catch me by surprise.
So a trigger could actually not even be the trauma. Like, you don't have to suffer that same trauma, but let's say, you know, an ambulance is going by at the time that you're suffering some trauma. Just hearing an ambulance, or it could be a dump truck, or I'm just using examples.
A particular color bandana, a particular sound, a song.
A scent.
A scent, very powerful one. And the thing is that those things that send your body into that place tend to generalize over time. So the category gets broader and broader and broader, and people spend more and more of their time kind of leaving their body just to be on the safe side.
Because there's so many triggers over time.
Right, or because your body, like it might be that you know, you were in a car accident and a BMW hit you. When you see BMWs, your heart may start to go, but it may be all cars of that color. It may become all cars. It may become hearing a car go by. It can generalize in certain ways sometimes, which makes your life narrower and narrower. And the problem is that when you're not in your body, because you checked out preemptively, you don't get to be there to have the experience of, oh, that wasn't that bad thing. Oh, that one's actually okay. I'm actually okay. So you don't extinguish the trauma response, and you don't end up being able to heal and learn all about the times when you are safe because you've left already. So that's why I say there has to be somebody home in order to heal.
And how do you get the person home to heal?
You have to work with them. This is where it really takes some,
skill on behalf of the therapist, I'm assuming.
I think so. The goal is to help somebody feel safe enough to want to try something, to want to tolerate, like they want, to be able to find the gentlest, most comfortable way. Like if there's a hard way and a more comfortable way, I'm always going to want to do the more comfortable way for people. But to be able to help them reclaim their body and their self, their sense of self.
And their safety,
and then that opens the door to be able to also be able to reprocess the trauma so that it doesn't rule you. It's not still in charge of you. You can go anywhere and do anything, and you have yourself back.
Cheryl, I have a question that is, a little bit personal in nature, but so when I was young, I suffered arguably like a ton of trauma, okay? Like my dad was abusive, I was molested by the neighbor. My father committed suicide when I was 9. I could just go on a list. I've been date raped. Like there's these things that I can just say so casually, right?
And I'm so sorry that every one of those things happened.
Well, thank you. But my question is, like, sometimes I think, am I a sociopath? Because I've come across so many people that have suffered one thing and the trauma just has stuck with them. So I guess my question is, how can somebody go through multiple traumatic events and have it not affect them, have them like not get stuck in the trauma versus someone could maybe have something even, less traumatic happen one time and that person's stuck in the trauma. Like, what's the difference in how different people suffer the trauma. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What I'm asking?
Really good question. When you rattle off all that stuff, who was there for you as a kid?
My mother.
Could you count on her to be there for you?
Yes. 100%.
That's the difference. Very often. Were you believed about things?
I never told anybody that. I mean, half of it, I probably didn't even tell anybody what I just told you right now.
Wow.
I mean, the suicide was a obvious one, but.
Thanks for sharing it. I think when we think about that also about not telling anybody, why do you suppose you didn't share that at the time? And I'm not judging it at all.
I don't take it at all as judging.
But like what went into that decision to not talk about it?
There were many things, and I have seen this in so many different cases that I've had, but I didn't disclose my abuse when I was younger because I liked the guy. Okay. He was, I mean, when I say I liked him, he was feeding other needs. This is typical grooming.
Typical grooming.
It's typical
behavior.
grooming.
Yes.
Right. This is a lot about what I write about in the book that I just published, but it's typical grooming behavior because you know this, I'm confident you know this, that, most abusers are someone you know, you love, and you trust, right? Yes. And there's that power differential between the two, and the child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome, that takes place. And so, my perpetrator was our next door neighbor and our landlord. And
there's a big power differential on multiple levels.
And also my dad was, absent. He had abandoned us. And then, this actually happened before he committed suicide, but he was still alive, but he lived in another state. And so
he wasn't there.
He wasn't there. He abandoned us. My mom was a single mom, just working her ass off to provide for the three of us. I have two brothers. Mm-hmm. And so in my tiny, 7-year-old brain, I was thinking, well, he lets us play in his fun, basement. He had this like kiddie playground, which I now see was his lair, for attracting children to come play. But he would take us to the train station, buy us chips and soda and stuff my mom wouldn't let us, which is typical grooming behavior as well, right?
Totally.
Like he saw this girl doesn't have a dad, let me, but I, in my 7-year-old brain, thought, well, I don't want to get him in trouble. And I thought, and if we get kicked out, we're not going to have a place to live, and it's going to be all my fault. And I also literally remember, like, even as a little girl, having the thought, like, my mom would probably kill him. And then
you wouldn't have either parent.
And then I wouldn't have, that's what I thought. I bet you my mom or my brothers, I thought my brothers will rip this guy apart. And so I was trying to protect everybody at a young age. I was like, I got to protect my mom. I got to protect my brothers. I got to protect the perpetrator. And also I was friends with the perpetrator's son, and I didn't want him to lose his dad. So I was trying to protect
everybody. Everybody. And look at that. You know what a 7-year-old looks like, right?
Yeah.
Little.
Yeah, I was little.
So you felt like you had secure support at home, that your mom loved you and she was there for you. But you also felt, because of the grooming and this is that adult manipulating a kid, you felt like you needed to protect everybody as the child in that situation. And I know now how, what an inappropriate burden that is for a kid. But I also understand how you would come to this kind of conclusion that you had to somehow hold this. And I think what very often makes the difference in terms of how somebody comes through a traumatic event or multiple traumatic events, which these things usually are, has to do with the resources that they have to bring to bear to cope with the event. Trauma happens when the thing that happens to you overwhelms your coping resources and your support. And it sounds to me like you had enough coping resources, and this doesn't make it okay, and I'm not minimizing any of these things that you went through, but you were able to, first of all, have some, they say if there is one adult person who's really solid, who is there for a kid, even when they have huge traumatic things happen. You know, the ACEs study where people, do you know about the ACEs study? We'll talk about that in a second. But if there is one reliable adult who you feel safe with and seen by and like they really have your back, that can make a critical difference later. Now, there are other things that can make people vulnerable to having their coping overwhelmed. But you were, you know, bright, resourceful, had a parent who you felt was there for you. And my sense from knowing you and all the dynamic, amazing things that you've done is you made meaning of what happened in a way that led to, instead of a post-traumatic stress disorder, led to post-traumatic growth. You grew in ways that probably never would have happened. You probably wouldn't have chosen the career that you chose or helped all of the survivors that you've helped if you hadn't had these terrible experiences and knew what it meant to be in this terrible place and have to fight through that.
Yeah, that's why I'm actually thankful and grateful. And I do think that like that's kind of the message in my book, is trying to show people, like, look at all these amazing people who suffered this trauma and they were able to overcome it and work through it and fight through the darkest time of their life and use that trauma to help other people and like turn it into their, like, basically their superpower. You know, most people's problems end up being, you know, the worst thing that happened in their life ends up helping them to find their life's purpose. And I think that is like a really amazing thing, because there's so, like you said, it's growth and strength.
Yes.
To where
I see it in you. I mean, you vibrate with it, with the strength and the resilience.
So
and the
I'm
power
not a
that you have.
sociopath.
I
started thinking, like, why was I not like?
No.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I was chubby. I think I turned to eating when I was younger. You know, so but it wasn't to the point where I had an eating disorder. I was just a fat little kid or whatever. But
no, this is not being a sociopath. Sociopaths have underactive nervous systems. They're unflappable. They like don't react to things that other people would, and they have no sense of conscience or empathy. So they certainly wouldn't be devoting their lives to helping people who were suffering the way that you did. You know, I mean, you know, it's such a powerful message. I'm so glad you wrote the book. I hope I'll get to read it.
Yeah, I have a copy on hand. I'll give you one and sign it.
I would love that.
Yeah.
You know, we don't get a choice about what happens to us all the time, but we do have a choice about what we do about it. Yeah. And what you're talking about is taking something that you didn't choose and making powerful choices about what you do about that, and paying it forward and doing what you needed to do to be able to build the beautiful life and relationships that you have now.
Yeah, I just want other people to, like, I just always, I don't know, not that I feel guilty, but like kind of like I see so many people, that even people who do have a nice support system in place, where some a-hole does something horrible to them, and it diverts their life on a whole nother trajectory, and kind of like steals the promise of that, that they had. And I don't know. And I would love for people to know that there's a path forward to heal. Yeah. And a lot of times that's like telling your story and using it to do something powerful, like change, to make sure a perpetrator can't do it to someone else, or even if it's just for their own personal healing. Yeah. They can get some type of therapeutic technique done to them, like EMDR or whatnot. And
it doesn't have to lead to the defining thing. Like, all of those things that happened didn't define your identity. They were challenges that happened.
Yeah, I'm like, bring it on. What's the next one you got for me, right?
You're a badass.
Yeah, well, I mean,
doesn't mean you didn't feel, though, right?
No, I definitely, don't get me wrong. Like, I was definitely, acted out and engaged in poor behavior when I was younger, and, had some issues growing up, but at some point, I think maybe it was all the psychology classes I took in college where I learned about it. I was like, oh, when you can kind of, I don't know, process those things that way, it helps. But I love the idea that you can heal that physical part of things too.
So it sits differently in your nervous system.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of really smart people want to use this to heal. And so often I hear people saying, I understand this wasn't my fault. I understand why I react to these things that are not life threats to me right now, but my body it's like my body didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
And they can't make what they know here show up
in their belly,
in their whole
gut,
body.
In the core of their being.
Yes. And we can do that. And we have ways of really doing that for people. And they don't have to have that defined.
Can young children do this too?
Yes. And there is actually a colleague of mine, Christine Marks Griffin, who has just written an EMDR children's workbook that just won these awards, and she has a practice in Northern California, actually, and I think she has a new office in Pasadena now. She has a wonderful children's practice. This stuff works great with kids. I've actually at one point when my son was little, he was watching YouTube. As a little guy, and he ended up seeing a video of a hockey accident where a hockey blade came up and cut this guy's neck. Oh. And he didn't die, but he was like bleeding all over the ice, which was a very traumatic thing for a little kid to see. And he was really shaken, and I sat him down in the living room, and I did some EMDR sets while he thought about that picture. And he told me that it's like he saw the blood in his mind turned into like looking like green paint, and then it all of a sudden like felt okay, and he's like, I'm gonna go play now, and he got up and he went away, and it just reprocessed it. And in the moment we were able to keep that from setting up shop in his little nervous system, and he said it felt like magic to him, so I thought
that's
was
awesome.
Cool.
Oh, it's like magic. I love it. I love that for all you parents out there whose children are suffering. Does it help with like depression and anxiety?
It helps with all of those things, and
let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about depression and anxiety, because that's huge, right?
It is huge. We have an epidemic right now of kids, adults as well, but so many kids are having symptoms of depression and anxiety. It's really, really common, and there are a lot of different reasons that we can look at that have contributed to that. And kids are interacting less with other kids in person, talking, and kind of face-to-face kinds of interactions. They're on their phones. There are these algorithms.
The devil device, right? The cell phone. Don't you think that's done a number on the psyche of the children in our country and all over the world?
I do. I really think that phones have done a lot of harm, and I think it's really meaningful that the people who invented the phones didn't let their kids play with the phones when they were growing up. And, I wish I had done more to limit that.
You and me both.
But depression, the thing about depression is that it's not just feeling down or feeling sad. And a lot of people feel like ashamed of their depression, that they should somehow be able to snap out of it or pull themselves up by their bootstraps, which actually, if you really think about that, how would that even work? I don't know. Yeah. That's always confused me.
I know,
as an expression.
It's a dumb expression, because if you pull up your bootstraps, you're like just pulling up your boots, right? It doesn't pull you.
Totally.
Yeah, that's dumb.
But it's not a voluntary thing, and it's not just feeling sad or down. It's almost like a filter, like the opposite of rose-colored glasses, where when you look at the world, it's characterized by hopelessness and helplessness. So you feel like, what's the point? Nothing I do is going to work anyway. And you also feel like you're always going to feel the way you're feeling. So you're not thinking like, I'm having a bad day and tomorrow's another day, or, And so when someone's mood is down and you start hearing hopelessness and helplessness, that's when we start thinking this may be a depressive episode. And depression is treatable also.
Now, isn't depression, though, like you say, it's not just a bad, the way you feel, but isn't it generally speaking have something to do with your chemical levels in your body?
It's interesting. It can.
But not always.
But not always. It would be fabulous if it were just, you don't have enough serotonin. And, for about a third of people, they respond very well to antidepressant medications. And it can be an imbalance where medication can make a big difference. Don't go to your general practitioner to get these, please, folks. Go to a psychiatrist, a psychopharmacologist, if possible, because the general practitioners don't have the training to know which medicine and which dose is going to work well, because it's a very individualized kind of thing. And they can be fabulous doctors, but they really only the psychiatrists usually have the kind of in-depth training to be able to tailor it to people. So that's been an issue where people go, oh, I tried them and they didn't work for me. Well, their GP said, hey, I got some samples and here. And they don't tell people that, SSRI antidepressants don't reach full therapeutic effect until 6 to 8 weeks after you start taking them.
Interesting.
And the first couple weeks, sometimes people have side effects.
Okay, I got to talk to you about the side effects.
All that stuff.
I'm going to guess I'm not alone in this. And my daughter and I actually laugh hysterically about this.
Yeah.
Because they, every time you're watching TV, they show those commercials.
Right.
It's
Ask your doctor,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, this could help you. And the little sad face and the person walks around with depression. And then it says side effects may include suicidal thoughts, hallucinations. In the list.
Horrible stuff.
The list of the side effects is worse. I'm like, I'll just take the depression. Thanks.
Well, the thing about the suicidal stuff is that, and this is a tricky one. This is why people need to have training in order to do this. Not all people who have depression feel suicidal or are at risk of suicide. But a lot of times when people are depressed, doing anything feels like such a huge effort that they have trouble even like brushing their teeth or getting out of bed and stuff like that. There's a group of people who don't kill themselves when they're really depressed because they don't have the energy. And for that group, with some of the medicine, your energy comes up before your mood comes up. So there can be a critical window where the medicine starts working where they get more energy, but they haven't actually gotten mood improvement yet. And that can create a window of risk for suicidality.
Interesting. I actually think that's why my dad killed himself.
Really?
Yeah, now that you're saying that. Because I
remember.
remember.
He just started an
He
antidepressant?
did.
Oh,
he was
gosh.
depressed, and he went to
wow.
a psychiatrist who put him on some antidepressant medication.
And and that people need to be closely monitored.
Yeah. I mean, this was back in the 70s, so,
Man.
But it does seem like there's a big push to like, just put them on medication. What do you think
If they
about
were
that?
like a quick and easy take a pill and everything, all the problems go away, wouldn't that be great, right? But that's not really how this stuff works. And even when the antidepressants work, very often it makes it easier for people to tolerate facing and feeling and talking through what's going on in their lives so that they can address the actual issues that are going on that may have led to the depression in the first place. It can like give you like a floor to stand on to be able to do the work in therapy. So medicine alone doesn't necessarily do the trick, but they can work together. And your therapist, if you're in therapy and taking medication, is also checking on you and monitoring, like, how are you doing? Is it time for us to bring in your psychiatrist and have a check about this? Or am I seeing anything that makes me worry that you might want to hurt yourself? That kind of stuff.
Interesting. And in terms of anxiety, like what's the difference between depression and anxiety?
Anxiety is not feeling safe. It's anxiety. There are different types of anxiety disorders. A lot of the time, they're variations of your brain playing what if. Like if they go, Heather, what if this really bad thing happened? And it plays this really kind of sadistic game with your brain because you think if you solve that problem of, okay, now I have to lie awake at night and figure out what I would do if that terrible thing happened. You think, oh, then I'll get to relax, right? What does your brain do right after you've solved that? Okay, well, what if this happened? It can throw endless worst case scenarios at you. And a lot of the work in terms of anxiety disorders is when that is completely run away with somebody, learning how to take control of that, to recognize that there's a part of your brain that is really just trying to freak you out and throw all of these catastrophizing things at you, and to learn how to manage that and to reset that. But this is where looking at, how is this showing up in the body? Some people have panic attacks. Some people constrict their behavior because there are certain things that if they do them, it makes them anxious, so they avoid doing them. Some people have generalized anxiety all the time. So
OCD, is that like a
that's a really
symptom?
tough one. That's a really tough one. OCD is lots of OCD folks have those catastrophizing kinds of thoughts, but also really worry about they can worry about themselves doing something terrible or harmful that they would really never do, but they become concerned that somehow they're not going to be able to stop themselves. This is different from someone who has, a criminal impulse for violence and things like that. Very often you'll see people with OCD who worry, I'm gonna do something and kill my baby, or I'm gonna do something like that. But they're not the people who would actually do it. And there's different types of OCD also.
Wow.
That's
and
a tricky one.
How do you help someone with the anxiety? Does this EMDR help with that as well?
It does, and it's interesting because PTSD, one of the major symptoms of PTSD is feeling that kind of distress and anxiety, even though there are a lot of other anxiety disorders that people can have. With EMDR, very often what we target is the negative belief about the self with anxiety. You can actually use instead of targeting a really upsetting event that's happened already, you can also target a future event that hasn't happened yet and visualize that and the thing that you're afraid to do and feel that activation and the distress that comes with that. And that's what gets reprocessed. And those things end up shifting, and your zone of, like, your comfort zone starts to get bigger. So there are different ways of targeting these things, and people can have them at the same time. You can have an anxiety disorder, you can have depression at the same time.
Double whammy, right?
Yeah. There are people who, those are mood disorders, and they can really mess with people's quality of life, but they are also treatable. Medication can help. There's something called TMS that is helpful for some people, which is a magnetic brain stimulation treatment that is not a medication, that can be very helpful for some people.
You, like, put magnets near their head or something?
Kind of, like, they sit in this chair and this is FDA approved, and they have they stimulate certain parts of the brain, and it's individually mapped for you, and there are places that do this. But also, psychotherapy is really a powerful way to help people to be able to look at things differently and increase their resourcing and their coping strategies so they can, not have to go it alone.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's fascinating. Highly encourage it for anybody out there who's suffering from some trauma, post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression. Mm-hmm. It is treatable, and there are people out there like Dr. Arutt who are wanting to come alongside and help you heal. So be sure to reach out to Dr. Arutt if you're suffering from one of those things and you do need help. And okay, so let's talk about, this is also fascinating. I love it. You're so smart.
Oh gosh.
I wish I was smart like you.
Please.
And
you are.
I was always fascinated by psychology. I actually took, I got a degree in psychology. That was what my undergraduate degree was in.
Yeah.
And so,
And it creates a lot of insight, right?
yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did help create a lot of insight just to other people and the way other people behave. And, I'm sure me as well along the way. But yeah, I always found those classes so fascinating.
Yeah. I can assure you you're not a psychopath.
Okay, good.
And I think I told you a story about one that you may want me to.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Do you want me to share about somebody who is?
Yes. Tell us a story about a psychopath. I love it.
I had, in one of the possible alternative sentencing evaluations, I was asked to go into a federal prison to meet with someone who had been convicted of a crime where he had a ring of people who went in and they would go into casinos in Vegas and reprogram the super slot machines, not like the regular slot machines, but the big giant ones that like you'd win a car and like hundreds of thousands of dollars and that kind of thing. They like walk in, reprogram the slot machines to respond to a certain pattern of putting certain coins in a certain order, a certain way, and it would make the machine hit the jackpot.
How were they getting access to reprogram them?
They were doing it like in broad daylight in the middle of the casinos at the time. Now this was in, this was some years ago, and I know it's like, I think the security is probably
tell us how. We'll go to Vegas right now.
Right? It was a bold crime. But
they got busted. He got busted, right?
He did. But the thing is, he got, it was a two-part crime. They'd go in and reprogram the machines, and then they'd find this very innocent looking person who was not part of their crime ring to be the winner of the slots, and they'd give them the code of what to do with the coins, and they were in a sense working for the criminals and would go in and be the one who would win this super slot.
You have to pay the taxes on the winnings, right?
Yeah, it's complicated, but these super slot winners kept coming up. It was a different person each time, but it was like somebody with a clean record and all of this. And so this man who I was supposed to interview to see if he was eligible for if he had any mitigating circumstances, his attorney wanted me to meet with him to see if, there was something that we could put that case before the judge for sentencing.
Lower his sentence.
To lower his sentence, yes. And I was young, and I was in, you go through security and you're in the federal prison, and they have like the watchtower with the guard there. And we were in like a room with a conference room with like a see-through wall of like bulletproof glass. And the guy's sitting there in his prison jumpsuit and flip-flops. And he was sitting there as if he were in a $10,000 suit. He was cool as a cucumber. This man was sitting there like he was about to close the biggest deal as the most successful executive of all time. And he was in prison. You're
like, you do realize you're wearing an orange
jumpsuit, right? It's like, it wasn't quite this color, but yeah. No, he was just, his demeanor and his situation.
Arrogant.
Like, and I'm sitting there and asking him questions and learning about his life. And there are all of these like very manipulative, like grooming and exploitation kinds of things that he was kind of revealing about his interpersonal relationships with other people that were really like not sitting well with me, but he was completely trying to make these things sound really normal. And as I'm interviewing him, all of a sudden I realize he's going, and he's talking to me. He's like, so you'll go in and you'll put the coins in and you'll do this, and it's going to be making it sound like the easiest thing in the world. And I'm like, oh my God, this man is trying to get me to commit one of these crimes.
He's like, all right, go into Harrah's and put in two
He was actually pitching me.
Gosh.
And I was stunned by how completely normal. He was making this sound. He was acting like this was a normal situation we were in. And
You're like, this guy's I'm interviewing him to try to get his sentence reduced, and he's trying to get me to go commit a crime.
yes, exactly. I was shocked. I noticed like the hair going up in the back of my neck. Like it was really like there was this, it was creepy and surreal. And I just realized, I could totally see how this man was living the life that he was living. And I had enough. And I left the prison and I called his attorney and I said, I don't think you want me writing this up. This man is exactly where he needs to be. There is nothing I can do for you here. This man was, he was a psychopath.
Total psychopath, huh?
And
you weren't going to write please lower his sentence, Your Honor.
He would immediately, he didn't even stop trying to commit more crimes while he was incarcerated. So, the recidivism risk was like
through the roof.
There you go. It's like he's still criming.
So did you get the scoop on how to hit the super lotto?
He didn't tell me how to reprogram the motherboards, but I don't think I needed to actually
We could be millionaires right now. Let's go to Vegas, baby.
Can you imagine like walking in there and you can because of the case you've worked on, but somebody like me, I can't imagine going. I'm kind of more of a rule follower. I can't imagine going in and just like opening up the slot machine somehow and doing that in the first place. But that was a very interesting experience.
Oh, I bet. You didn't see that one coming.
No, I did not.
I love it. I love that story. That's hilarious. Okay, so you have just unpacked so many fascinating topics here. I love it. Okay, just a little bit about your history, because you were like on a bunch of TV shows. You were like a child actress.
Yes. Yeah. I got into acting by accident. When I was little, my dad was a doctor in Vietnam. He was sent to Vietnam for a year when I was a very little kid. And my mom would just take me with her where she went. And we lived in New York. And she had lunch with a friend at an ad agency. And the casting director happened to be on that floor when we were there. And I was a little kid with red hair. And I know it's shocking, but like a really big mouth. Like I talked a lot as a little kid. And she just started talking to me and my mom, and she convinced my mom to send a picture to an agent, and my mom had no idea about anything about the business and just thought nothing would happen. But I started getting commercials and then, soaps, and I did a lot of these, like, I don't know if you remember these after-school specials.
Yeah, I remember. I loved after-school specials.
I did a lot of those.
Yeah, and that conjunction junction.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. So,
I'm only a bill. I loved all those.
It was a lot of fun. It was like some kids did soccer and some kids did track, and I, would go in and
act on after school specials.
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun.
Any that we can look up and find.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's a bunch. There's I think they list them all now on IMDb, so you can actually.
Oh, I'm gonna have to Google you and check it all out. But
it was a fun thing to do as a kid. I worked as a teenager. I worked through my early 20s. I had a vested pension with SAG. I joined the union when I was like 3 years old, and I worked for 22 years. And then I started feeling like I wasn't loving it as much. And the scripts were getting this was like the 80s and the early 90s. And the part that I really loved was the whole psychological piece about like what makes people tick and like what do they want and what gets
you're
in the way.
Doing a deep dive into your character and trying to.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't getting at that point. I wasn't getting really scripts that did that enough very often, and it was very focused on like what you look like and what you weigh and like are you going to get your boobs done and like all this stuff that was just became less fun. And I had a roommate who was doing her first year of a doctoral program in psychology. And I was like, this stuff is fascinating. And I loved it. And she and I are still friends. She actually, it's nice. She's also a psychologist now in Colorado. I had to sit my manager down and just be like, I had a great run, but I want to do something else now. And I thought I was just like totally leaving doing anything to do with TV, became a psychologist, and started getting inquiries from prospective patients who were all like actors and writers and directors and showrunners, like all these creative people. Had no idea that I had ever done any of that, but they were like, you get me, you understand my life. And I did. And it became like a special population that I really work well with creative artists and enjoy it and understand them. And then I started getting calls from Court TV and Jane Velez Mitchell and, Nancy Grace and Dr. Drew and these other shows. The first one had said, we always have a forensic psychologist on this Court TV show. And I realized it's always a man. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a woman for a change? And I started Googling and your name kept coming up. Would you want to come to CNN? And what would you say about the case and everything? And I told her. And she said, great, okay. So, you come, we'll do makeup and we'll do this. And she said, so will this be your first time on TV? And I said, I thought you called me because you knew that I used to do this. And she's like, well, I guess we called the right person then. And it led to just a whole bunch of other shows. And it was fun because it was easy and fun to do. But this time they cared what I thought. And that was new. And that was really fun to get to actually have your brain be valued and not just the other stuff.
It feels good, doesn't it?
Yes.
When someone like, wait, you actually, are interested in what I have to say. And
yeah,
I think that it's hard because it's not arrogance. It's just confidence because you've seen so much and you've done so much and you've learned so much and you take pride and you're a smart woman and you have a lot to say. Like I could talk about, sexual assault cases and crimes all day, every day. But that's because it's my passion. I know a lot about it.
You're an expert.
I'm an expert in that area. And there's, there's something, I think wonderful about using, that talent and your education and your background and your history and your experience and what you've seen and all the people you've been able to help and share that expertise, on a show or because maybe something that you have to say can really help somebody.
That's really why I do it. Because there's so many people who would never walk into a therapist's office in the first place. But when they see something where someone's like, what is borderline personality disorder? Or what are the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? Or, what does somebody do if they see their loved one having these symptoms? And people get the information, and it really, my hope is that it can really make a difference for people, even if they wouldn't show up themselves in a therapist's office for treatment.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's a great service that you're doing. I love that you're on all these TV shows and people can learn about you and be like, hey, maybe I could call her. But so you actually do treat people though. So if someone needs this EMDR therapy or they have a loved one who does, be sure to call Dr. Arutt, who it's Arutt, Dr. Cheryl Arutt, like carrot. Just remember her red hair, but it's Arutt. And where can our listeners find you if they want help? If you're a lawyer and you need an amazing expert witness who's got tons of experience and knowledge, Dr. Cheryl Arutt is here for you. If you need an actress, she's here for you. If you need
I'm not really acting anymore.
I know. I'm just teasing. But she, if you need her expertise on a fabulous TV show, you're available for TV appearances as well. And have you written a book? You need to write a book.
Oh gosh, thanks. I have a book in mind, but I am, when I was spending those years on Dr. Drew's HLN TV show, all of the other people had a book and they're like, so-and-so, author of this, and buy their book. And I was the only one who didn't have a book yet because I hadn't gotten it together to write one. but I think I likely will. And
Well, I'm going to have you back
thrilled
on the
that you
show.
did. Oh
and
my
promote
gosh!
your book.
I can talk
And
about
then
the
Robin's
book.
going to throw you a big launch party.
Oh my gosh!
It'll be super bougie, like she
Ooh.
always does throw those.
She
fabulous
does
parties.
throw a great party.
Gosh, oh my
Yes.
God, I could talk to you for hours, but we're out of time. So I can't thank you enough for all the information. I hope the listeners got something out of this. I know I sure did. I have
thank
some
you.
people that I would love to try the EMDR, and I know I'm going to have my clients who are suffering from some type of trauma. I'm going to talk to them about it and inform them that there's definitely a technique that can help them to free their body and their mind and their spirit and get back to the person they once were before the trauma. So fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming here and driving so far to share all this information. It's been amazing having you here, and I can't wait to have you back after you write your book.
Thank you so much. It's
you.
great to be here and see you.
All right, well, that's a wrap. We're out of time, and so I'm going to have to say goodnight until the next time we meet again. But until then, if you can't find the light, be the light, like Dr. Cheryl Arutt.
Be the light, shine so bright.